Today's episode of the Radiator Arms may contain mature themes and discussion of mental health issues. But you're adults, you can deal with this sort of thing. Maybe not so suitable for the kiddies though. Enjoy. Hello everybody and welcome to this episode of the Radiator Arms. Now, as ever, we have here to my right, the man in the cans, the ever-fragrant Will the Plank.
Hello.
And to my left, the glowing Ant.
Hello.
From Sports and Touring and, of course, JM and Friends. And, naturally, you've got me, the so-called JM. And today's episode is all about the positive power of the automobile, the healing ability of the motor car, the motorcycle, and various associated things. Something that all three of us in this room greatly believe in, and I am sure those at home do too. In fact, I'm going to start us off with an letter. We have received to the Radiator Arms email address a beautiful email.
And what is that email address, James? Let's remind everybody.
It is landlord@theradiatorarms.com. So if you'd like to write in and potentially have your 2 minutes of fame, please do. Now, this is from a lovely chap called Darren, who's been to a few of my meets and is a great guy. And he said, "Good morning, just been listening to your podcast regarding car shows and meets. And there was a bit in particular that I wanted to share with you. This is about when you talked about letting kids sit in your cars and encouraging the petrol heads of tomorrow. Well, this doesn't just apply to kids. My niece, who is 20, has always had a fascination with the Hakosuka GTR. She's got posters, t-shirts, drinks, coasters, hoodies, anything she could lay her hands on. She'll often come with me to car shows in the hope of seeing one, but very rarely do they appear. In fact, we just recorded our last episode all about Japanese cars. And if you want to hear us talking about that, please make sure to check it out if you haven't already. Now, she was desperate to see one in the flesh, but was getting a bit despondent. However, last year, we tracked one down, thanks to help from the GTR Heritage Centre in Durham, who told me that one would be on display at the Gravity Show at the NEC. I bought the tickets and off we went. We found the car and she was thrilled to finally be able to see it right there in front of her. The guys on the stand who were displaying the car could see just how much it meant to her and offered her a seat inside the car. She couldn't say yes quickly enough, got into the car and promptly burst into tears. As per photo, see attached. We have always let kids and adults have a sit in our cars whenever we're at shows. In fact, it's one of the most enjoyable parts of the show, knowing that someone is interested in what we've brought along, and we will continue to do so as well. Now, I'll get permission to potentially show this photo to the wider audience, but just for illustration, there we have what you can clearly see is a very emotional moment of a young lady getting to meet her automotive hero. And yeah, I thought that'd be a good start, but gentlemen, I'm going to hand it over to you.
But before we get into that, actually, I just want to say the guys at the GTR Heritage Centre are absolutely awesome, really awesome guys. I was up there a couple of years ago with my friend Bob Lachley, who formerly was the program director for Nissan Sports Cars, and they had his former Nissan 370Z Nismo company car, or one of his former Nismo 370Z company cars that was still in the family, and he was contemplating selling, and they were just doing some work on it, preparing it for potential sale. And yeah, they gave me a complete tour of their new facility and was sort of showing me all the cars that they had there, either in their collection for sale or having work on them. Really, really cool. And I might actually leave a link in the description to that video, because it was quite a nice video about Bob, his relationship with Nissan over quite a long period of time, his involvement with the GTR, with the 370Z and his final project, which was the new Nissan Z, which some people call 400Z, but it's not. It's just a Nissan Z.
I have one thing I want to say before we get into this topic. The discussion on bikes. Now, the episode in real time here hasn't gone live yet, so I don't know what the reactions are. But I went down to a motorcycle showroom and I sat on a few bikes the other day.
Oh, how'd you get on?
Oh, I tell you what, I had the fizz. It felt good.
Yeah.
It felt good. I've just about, as well, for those worrying about my impending divorce, I've just about helped my wife come to terms with the fact that this is something I'm going to be looking into at some point in the not too distant future.
You've got departmental approval for investigative work, have you?
It's more of a case of she knows if I don't do it, I'm going to be a whiny, miserable little moron.
Yeah.
And it'll just be one of those things where I think she just wants me to just shut up about it,
Yes.
basically.
Didn't we talk about this last time? The worst thing you can do with kids,
Yeah.
and I think with big kids as
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
is
yeah.
to try and get in the way of their dream. In fact,
Yeah.
encourage it, let them get it out of their system, and at some point they might come to realise that maybe it isn't for them.
Yes. Well, I went to discuss my CBT. The place where I would like to do it are starting to take it on maybe later this year, if not certainly next year it will be happening. So I'm going to hopefully be doing that at some point. So watch this space. I've just got to do a bit of saving up for the gear because we've discussed this. The gear is expensive if
It
you
gets
want good
pricey.
stuff.
So, but if you want, at some point, there's a few. There's like a, is it ANS or whatever? It's a national chain of motorcyclists. So JNS, that's the
Yeah.
one. National chain of motorcycle places. We've got one not too far from us. I'll take you there and show you what it is that you will need, what you won't need,
Okay.
and what you maybe would like but isn't essential.
Yes.
And you can then work out costings and whatnot. But if you do your CBT, let me know, obviously in advance, preferably. But we'll try and find somewhere that can hire out bikes for cheap as well.
Okay.
If you want, we can just hire a pair of 125s and go out together and just because it's much better doing it with somebody.
Absolutely. That'll be a laugh. Now we just need to get somebody else do their CBT.
No, he can drive in the middle of us in the car and it'll look like a really budget presidential convoy. It couldn't afford the sort of, fleet of Hondas. So it's just, proper Goldwings or whatever they use.
dear.
I'm going to buy you those high-vis jackets that say polite on the back of it.
I'll
Yeah.
wear that.
Yeah.
We could do our own Radiator Arms themed ones. How about that?
Can we get you some little sort of like dictatorial flags to go on the end of the R8?
Yeah.
Going down the road.
Yeah.
Oh dear. So yes, that's a little update on that. Watch this space, people. I can't promise that I'm going to become a fully fledged biker, but I'm at least going to see if it's for me, and we will report back and let you know how that goes.
And hopefully not like a Brit at the seaside who runs headfirst into the sea only to sort of turn tail immediately going, oh, that's cold, that's cold, that's cold.
I got a little update, and that is when I went through the whole Ants Next Car series with James, and we tried loads of different cars, and eventually I settled on my Lamborghini Gallardo. A lot of people in the comments were complaining that I got the wrong car. I should have got the 488, or I should have got the 720S, or I should have got this, or I should have got that, because basically it's the same car. Well, for those people who are interested and were saying that to me, you might want to check out the latest video on Sports and Touring, because I actually do a back-to-back drive in both those cars. And, well, let's just say I answer your question and you might not like the answer. That's all I'm going to say.
I think the Gallardo's great, regardless of whether even anybody would think it's the same car as the R8 or not, which it's not. It's a wonderful piece of machinery just from the standpoint of looking at it, let alone being in it, let alone driving it. Haven't done that, but, I've been out as a passenger in the car at this point, and it was a good choice. It's Will the Plank approved.
Excellent. And in the last episode around Top Gear, which was a couple of episodes ago, one of the things we talked about was the Nissan Sunny. And as of this day of recording, your Nissan Sunny video has just come out, hasn't it?
I drove a Sunny. And you know what's really fascinating is when you put these videos out, you never really know what comments you're going to get. But already from the sort of few hours worth of comments that I've had on that video, there are a whole bunch of people in Scandinavian countries, places like Finland, that have got a real affinity for it. Apparently, there's none left now because they all corroded long, long ago. But apparently it's one of these cars that back in the day, everybody had a Nissan Sunny. or the Pulsar or whatever the badge on it was. They loved them. Everyone's got a fond memory of them. So I do find that really interesting. We often forget that, of course, us being in Britain, you're always going to see stuff from the perspective of a British petrol head. And there'll be cars that maybe to us are weird, niche, unusual, but other places were a massive hit. And then, of course, it happens the other way around where, for example, I think the Ford Capri was on sale here for 3 years after it went off sale everywhere else. Just because when everywhere else fell out of love with it, we kept buying the damn thing.
Well, I mean, the story behind even Caterham was pretty much along the lines of they had an order book that was still full and not fulfilled.
Yep.
Lotus were going to stop making the car. So they said, well, we'll stop making it when people stop buying it. And they're still there today.
Yeah, I saw a few people that really hoped that perhaps Lotus would do a similar thing with the Elise, and it would have been actually quite cool to see Caterham then take over production of the Elise. But I think the problem is, if you were to try and build an Elise in a low volume, bespoke way, it's going to be like $150,000 car. Like, you just can't economically build a car like that, or you can't economically build any sort of car. And it's just was not going to happen. It wouldn't work, but lovely idea nonetheless.
Indeed. Right. But we're on the topic of the positive power of cars. And before we do the positive stuff, I want to mention a slightly negative thing, and that is the negative effect. Because when you are feeling at your lowest, there's nothing, well, there is lots of things worse, but there are many things, or not that many things worse, than being kicked while you're down and then finding out there's something wrong with your car that is very expensive. And I've as a man who knows my pain, and I thought, if we're going to talk about the positive side, let's get any negativity out of the way first so we can end on a high. But Will, I feel like you got a story.
That was an exhalation and a half.
2023 was the worst year of my life. I am honestly amazed I am still alive and still here. And that's something I'm sure we'll move on to later a bit more as we go along and talk about this today. But when you're at your lowest point and you're feeling the most kind of depressed and done, I remember walking into my therapist's office and saying, we either sort this out or I'm going to go home and find a way to not be here anymore. The great thing my Golf decided to do was blow its head gasket.
Oh, gosh.
And that was just before Christmas time as well, which was already a time where I was feeling just not interested in that year, and just one of those. And then suddenly it's like, yeah, here's £800 to £1,000 worth of money you've got to spend. And the thing, what I was at then was, I couldn't afford to really replace it with another car. Any car I would have bought at that moment in time would have probably been equally as problematic for the budget I had. And it was just a case of like, I've got nothing to do. I need my car to get around. So I persevered like I always do with that car and coughed up the money. But I was just pretty much sitting there like, Christmas is cancelled. Let's be honest. It's absolutely cancelled. Just about managed to make it all right that year. But, it is true. There is insult to injury is a real thing. And it was one of those things where I think I almost found myself laughing because it cannot get any more ridiculous than this, that I am at the lowest point in my life. And now this bloody car has gone, do you know what would be fun? I'm going to shoot all the coolant out and I'm £500 at the machine shop, having your head skimmed, having the valve seats reground, having a lot of work to it done and basically completely over. The upside to that is it doesn't burn any oil now, so that's one good thing.
Your car is just like the automotive Homer Simpson going, worst day of your life so far.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, in time, as we know, I've forgiven it. It's a vehicle I am very fond of, and I have many positive memories with this thing. Which I'm sure we'll talk on to. But that is just a car breaking down. It's at one point my Maestro was the most reliable member of my fleet. And it was around the same kind of time. The Golf was off having its head gasket sorted, and I was down there as well in the cold working on that. And then my van decided it would, which I no longer own, but my van decided it would just spring a fuel leak. But it wasn't like in a rubber line. Oh no, it was one of the kind of the aluminium pipes on the front of the engine, on the PD engine, was just like, yeah, I'm gonna spray fuel everywhere. So I had to tax my Maestro in the middle of winter to get home that day.
Oh no.
So yeah.
Yeah, that is pretty brutal. I remember having to have a conversation with an insurance company in the car park of a petrol station because my other half's car got run into at a roundabout. Basically, it was a little classic, like 2005 Renault Clio. We were at a roundabout coming out of Bury St Edmunds, and she started going to enter the roundabout, but her car came around the roundabout pretty quickly. She stopped, and then there's a bang. And we're like, oh, heck. This is the first time I've been in a car accident. It's not really much of an accident, but, like 5 mile an hour shunt type thing. The other half instantly just burst into tears because she'd only had, I think, about a year or two since, I think she'd had 2 incidents, both in the winter, one of which where she tried to brake, couldn't stop, she slid into the back of somebody. And then I think a year later, somebody did the same thing to her. Someone had also, I think there'd been a car park incident about 2 weeks before this where someone had reversed into the side of her car because they weren't paying attention, and they were trying to basically track him down because he was being a bit squirrely and they weren't sure if maybe he was insured or not. And so this then happened immediately afterwards, so hence her being just utterly distraught. I then got out of the car to be greeted with a lady, I think in her 60s, also in floods of tears. And it turned out she'd just been to the hospital down the road to see her husband who'd had a heart attack. And she was now coming home. So she hadn't been paying attention to what she was doing. And it's just, and I'm in the middle. And it's like, oh no. And it's like, look, it's okay. It's fine. We exchanged details. She was really lovely about everything, massively apologetic. But my other half was in no fit state to drive, so it's like, okay, can you get us to the petrol station so we're out of harm's way? And then I've got to phone the insurance company to say, like, look, I can drive the car home, the car is drivable, but at the time I wasn't on her insurance. So it's like there's nothing you want to be doing in the middle of, like, when you got a crying partner next to you on the phone to the insurance company.
And you didn't have third-party cover on any of your policies at this point?
No, not at the time. No, I was too young. I was in my early 20s, and at the time my insurer had this weird clause where you had to be a homeowner to get that cover. Why I don't know. Although this will make you laugh. We have to find humour in these situations, don't we? Because I think it is humour that gets us through some of our toughest times. It's a very human and definitely a very British thing. Another girlfriend of mine, there haven't been many, her granddad died on the phone to his insurance company.
Oh, gosh.
His last words on this earth were bloody insurance. And basically, he was on the phone trying to negotiate something. The wife came in to check on him. How are you doing? Bloody insurance. Went through. 2 minutes I went through. He slumped on the floor.
Oh,
gone. Oh, we're really sorry. We'll have to call you back. Anyway, 2 weeks later, they phoned back going, excuse me, can we speak to him, please? Because we got cut off the last time. She just said to him, like, what did you say to him? Because I don't know what price you quoted him, but you killed him.
Oh, God.
That must... Oh, my God. It's the trope of, how they say, God, insurance is so high, it gives me a heart attack. It literally did.
It did. It finished him off.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Having worked on the phones before, I can see how that would... Yeah, how that would be a thing.
They were a lovely couple as well. The girlfriend, there's a reason that she is an ex, but her grandparents were the loveliest, nicest people in the world. We went to their house, first time I ever met them, and she comes out with this trolley, like a proper dessert trolley, with 3 or 4 full-size cakes on it. And I was like, God, aren't we lucky that we come round as she'd baked all those cakes? And she's like, no, she knew we were coming, so she baked all of them. I'm like, there's only 2 of us, and there's 4 full-size cakes. She's like, yeah, but she wants to make sure that you've got whatever it is that you want. And I was like, how many people in your family have got diabetes? She's like, all of them.
Wow. That is so true. You always end up, I think, and this is a little bit of relationship story, so you always end up missing the family more than you do the people you break up with, don't you? I don't know if that's something that people agree with.
I think that's normal, isn't it? Because you didn't have to live with the family 24/7.
Well, no, that is true, and especially the pets. Oh, dear.
Oh, pets are lovely. I love my pets.
Yes.
So what's been going on in your life, Ant?
Well, luckily, no one's been dying, which is good.
That's handy.
Yeah, yeah. But I like the only time I can think of that where I think a car kicked me while I was down was my old Mark II Mondeo ST24, and it wasn't so much the car; it was just the battery. But I don't know if you can picture this sort of kind of cold, wintry, early evening. Literally, in the previous couple of years, I think my dad had died. I'd been divorced. I was broke. I was just about keeping the car running at the time, frankly, because I couldn't really afford it. I was trying to hang on to my house, and I'd got this job. I was working very long hours, and I had to pick up Damani from school. So I picked up my son, and we're on our way home, and it started and I was just feeling like really low. But you suck it up for your kids.
Yeah.
You hold it in. How was your day? And then on the outside and on the inside, you're like, I don't know how much longer I can do this. And then I thought, look, let's just get home. Had a really, really rough week. Let's just get home, make dinner, we'll watch some cartoons or something, and I'll read him a story for bed, and I'll probably be okay after that. Anyway, so we're part way home, and then suddenly the dials started acting all weird. The speedo and the rev counter was going all over the place. I'm like, what's going on? And then suddenly the car just cut out on the middle of a roundabout on a junction of the M25.
Oh no!
During rush hour, right? And I was just like, oh God, this can't be worse. Now, it was on the sort of like inside lane of this big roundabout on an overpass on the motorway. So I was like, okay, right, we have to get out of the car. We can't stay in the car. It's not safe. So we got out of the car, got over these railings, and was off to the side. I called the AA, and we were sitting there freezing ourselves off. And obviously you can imagine like a 4 or 5 year old kid, not really,
Oh yeah.
not necessarily appreciating. He was actually pretty good, to be fair, but and then this is the thing. At that moment, I thought I knew when everything was going to be okay. Because in the middle of the traffic, I heard, Ant! I went, huh? What? My former PA from the previous company that had collapsed after 2001 with the whole 11-9 thing, saw us by the side of the road, and he was on his way home, and he shouted out, he's like, is everything okay? And I went, no. He said, how long until the AA come? And I went, they've said about 2 hours. He went, do you want to send him home with us? We'll give him dinner. I went, do you know what? Go for it. So off to Marnie went, and yeah. And then I just thought, do you know what? Now I know everything's going to be okay. And it was just that moment where, somebody that happened to be passing by at that exact moment, people you trust as well, who you don't mind, their kids and my son had kind of grown up together. Yeah, it was a good moment. That was a good moment. I honestly was at that point. I wasn't anywhere near what you described, but I was certainly at that point where I was just like, I don't know how much more of this I can take,
But it is fascinating, isn't it? That I find, particularly when you're not feeling great, and often after a sustained period of things not being great, it can sometimes be just the smallest, tiniest little thing that can really help improve things, make those clouds part, as it were, and even if it doesn't actually really fix anything, if it just makes you feel a little bit better, makes you feel a little bit more upbeat, it makes all the difference in the world sometimes. If it just gives you that little shot in the arm that you were looking for, that bit of emotional Red Bull. Sponsorship deals on the Radiator Arms are available. Then hey, look, lads, it's the 21st century, right? We've got to commercialise this, okay? If we can't, then we'll all be singing for our supper. And
he literally does.
he does sing.
I do.
Hey, he sings for people's breakfast every Monday morning at 7 o'clock.
There we go. And if anyone is new to the podcast and you didn't know, that entire opening theme tune was written and performed by Will.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
I am the only one in this room with absolutely no musical ability whatsoever.
Oh, and don't we know it, darling?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I just look at a guitar and I can see it going out of tune.
I think you're right, though. It is the little things that make such a big difference, because you could either go one way, you could either go of death by 1,000 cuts, or just, one tiny little thing which just has to happen, just something that just makes you laugh in the midst of these situations, or, a random interaction like that, seeing people, just the chances, like, what are the chances of that kind of thing happening, at that time, for you, and then just kind of like making the situation that was like just almost awful, being okay.
Yeah, and on the plus side, it was only the battery, and
Yeah.
they happened to have a compatible one in the truck, so
Yeah.
they literally just swapped the battery over, and I was fine. So I mean, it could have been worse. It could have been the end of that car. Now, luckily, fortunately for me, I turned things around over the next couple of years financially, and I got into a better place. And then, just as I was feeling good, Damani decided to discover a talent for racing, and then I was broke again.
Yeah, but at least you could see where your money was going.
Oh well, this is true.
I was going to say, at least you're broke on your own terms.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah. It wasn't forced. But I think that there have been lots of times where I've been maybe feeling a little low, and maybe at home by myself because my son's with his mum that day, and everyone's busy doing their own thing, and you're like, I don't know what to do. And then I'd be like, you know what? I'm going to go for a drive. And especially if it's a car that you really love, regardless, whether it's a Mondeo or a Maestro or a 350Z was my favorite. Like, that was a time I would just drive that car everywhere. And, you just go outside, especially if it was a nice day. Just get in the car and drive. Actually, my son and I were talking about night drives the other day, and how there's something about if it's spring, early autumn, or summer is good. Winter's not so good usually, but going for a night drive, like, it's just something about the air. It's crisp and it's clear, and you're just cruising along, and it's just the lights.
So the last couple of weeks or so, I've had Ant's RX-8 on my driveway, which is more or less bone stock example of a very, very late 2010, which was last model year sold.
It was the last model year.
Crystal pearl white R3. Beautiful car, actually. I didn't really appreciate how good looking the RX-8 actually is, particularly from the front. And I had so much going on in my life. I mean, I have got to that crazy stage now where there's 2 Ferraris parked on the driveway. They haven't moved for about 2 weeks. I need to move them in case the batteries start going flat on them. But I have press cars, and obviously they've got to be filmed. You've got other stuff that needs to be filmed. And so the RX-8 basically wound up being shuffled around the driveway for about a week or so, which I hate doing because it being a rotary, you're not really meant to just start it, move it, and stop it. You can cause all sorts of grief for yourself. So came to one evening, and I was talking to my other half and saying, what do you fancy for dinner? And she said, you know what, actually, I kind of fancy a pizza. But the local pizza place has kind of gone a bit downhill. So I thought, there's a pub in a village about 20 minutes away, and they do some pretty darn good pizzas, actually, for a pub. They do all their own smoked meats and things. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to take the car out because the car needs a drive. And I think I need a drive. I've been working a lot. Typically, this time of year, I book my schedule to the point of craziness, assuming that at some point the British weather will intervene and tell me that actually I can't work on certain days. And then what I do is I stay home and I edit. Well, the weather's been really good lately, which has been fantastic, but I've been run off my feet with filming. So I thought, right, let's get this car out, get some miles on it. Went out there, drove, just fell in love with that thing. It was just absolutely sensational. Not the quickest thing out there, but I don't care. Just the engine was zingy, the gearbox is fantastic, the steering is beautiful, and the sun was that perfect height. It's about 7 o'clock or so you've got great visibility, but the roads are quiet. There was about 2 or 3 red kites on the prowl, kind of getting their dinner as well. And I just had the most magnificent drive, and you come back from it and you just feel recharged.
Yep.
But one thing I did want to bring up as a topic in this, talking about the cars. We've obviously talked about, our cars that we have, the upsides, the downsides. But what did the car do for all of you before you could actually drive?
Oh, it was an obsession.
Absolutely. It was just something that I could not stop thinking about. I mean, I'll be honest, as much as nowadays, and because we've done the Top Gear episode, I don't agree with everything like Jeremy Clarkson and the boys said about cars. Having experienced cars now for myself, back then, the obsession that Top Gear was just like that God was underneath them kind of thing. Do you know?
Oh yeah,
you know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
It's like
the picture of Jesus just underneath, JC. Yeah,
exactly. And it was Forza Motorsport. It was the racing games. It was just something to focus my energy on, all playing computer games all the time, obviously watching, Top Gear, Fifth Gear, things like that, reading the car magazines and stuff like that. I remember I was on a trip in France with my school when I was maybe year 6 or year 7, and I went and I'd buy all the local kind of like car magazines and stuff. Couldn't even read them because I didn't have that good French, but I'd just sit and look at the pictures, and then I'd go to the back pages, and I spent an entire 2-hour bus journey setting myself a budget and looking about what kind of cars I would buy for if I wanted a sports car, if I wanted a family car, if I wanted a van and things like that, and then looking around seeing what the best deals I could find was. And my friends sitting next to me like, what are you doing? And I explained that. They're like, are you mad? Why are you doing that? I'm like, because I love cars. So, my wife can confirm that it's cars with me like 24/7. They're always on mine. It's always something to do with them. So I said, even before driving, it was a case of going out in my dad's car as well, as a passenger. I just loved being in the car. If anybody would want my brothers, they'd say, should we go somewhere? Yep, you don't have to ask me twice. I'll sit in the car. Let's just go somewhere and go driving. That's what it was for me.
Same. And I think for me, it was significant. It was like a driving force. It was like an aspirational thing.
Yes.
I think I mentioned previously on an episode, at the lowest time in my life when I was, basically both my parents had long gone from the country. I was basically couch surfing. I was homeless, and there was this red and black MG Metro Turbo at this dealership that I kept seeing, and that was just like, right, if you work really hard, you'll be able to afford one of those. And then it just, obviously over time, it's just been a bit of a ladder. And then, you get the next car and it's like, oh, if you work really hard, you can get one of those. And if you work really hard, you can get one of those. And it's the thing that's, I think, been a significant factor in pulling me forward. Fortunately, I really love all the work that I've done. Well, not back then. But once I got out of the sort of the world of being stuck in a minimum wage job that I didn't enjoy, and got into the world of a reasonably paid job that I did enjoy, I've really, you didn't have to get me to stay late. I would just stay late because I was enjoying the work. But there are always times when you don't want to stay late, or you are just tired and you have to push through. And it's times like that where I'd be thinking, right, just keep working hard and you can get to that point where you get that next car. So that's one of the ways in which I think it's influenced me.
Did you also feel really guilty for feeling that way as well?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's amazing, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I should be driven
productive.
by
exactly.
other things. I shouldn't be so materialistic. And it's like, but it's not about materialism, is it? It's not, even though it is a material thing, it's not that you want it for material reasons. You want it because it makes you, what's the word? How do you describe it?
Inspires you.
Inspires you, yeah. It inspires you.
You could, because, there's, there are things that we need in life as human beings. You need preferably some shelter, some warmth in the winter, food and drink, and you can stay alive, and that's great. But I think we've advanced, certainly, where we live in Britain, to the point where, okay, everybody should be able to get what they need. Unfortunately, not everybody can. And, there are ways we can always help this, but for the majority of people, you can have what you need. Now, as human beings, I think there is nothing more natural than wanting things. There is nothing more natural than wanting something that you don't have. And if you can use that to help inspire you to you know, go that extra mile, do that extra thing, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And then if at the end of it you can have the fruits of your labor to enjoy it. I mean, I'm very, very open about the fact that, you know, and I think this is something that has changed with some of the generations that have come after us. I always saw, you know, a Ferrari as that is what successful people have. Like, if you have really made it in life, like if you've really, really done well, you go out and buy a nice car. Doesn't have to be a Ferrari, because also when we were younger, you never saw Ferraris about. You didn't really see Porsches about. You know, a BMW was a pretty fancy thing. You know, my dad had a BMW M3 when I was a kid, and I should point out that when I was born, I think I once found the books for my dad's first year in business, which was basically the year that I was born, and I think his business turned over about $8,000. And at that point in time, my parents, they'd only married a few years earlier. They'd got a mortgage. I think the mortgage was at about 15% interest.
Oh, yeah. I remember those days.
Yeah. And they genuinely did have months where it's like, do we go shopping or do we pay the mortgage? You know, now I'm very, very fortunate because it wasn't this way for a lot of people, but the business that they started then flourished. I know a lot of other people who saw their business, often through no fault of their own, then fail or whatever, and some of them were able to rebuild, some of them to not. But, you know, I think there's always got to be that thing that you want. My dad was always big into motorbikes, you know, and so you always wanted to have a bike. Obviously, bikes are a lot more accessible than cars as well. But he did also like cars. So when he could, he got a nice car. And, you know, the first one I remember having was his E36 non-Evo M3. When he later got a Ferrari, it was a little bit different back then, because the funny situation is that the M3 that he had then is probably worth now, I don't know, probably worth as much as it was back then. He bought a Ferrari 328, which at the time I think would have cost similar money, if not less than a new M3. And it was definitely less money than a new, I think the Porsche 968 was out at the time, coming to the end of its life.
They were cheap.
Yes, they were about 30 odd grand, but they did the Club Sport, which was even cheaper than the regular one. So again, he paid, I think, just under 30 grand for his first Ferrari. So that obviously, that's a lot more money today than it was then. But that same car now would be like a 80, 90 grand car. Yeah. The funny thing is the house we were living in was only about, I think, 95 or 100 grand. And of course now everything's got all squiffy. So now the car, has gone up in value, but the house is probably a £300,000 or £400,000 house. So yeah, things have changed. Things aren't quite as accessible as they used to be.
I think that whole guilty feeling that I can also relate to, I think it's because non-car people tell you that you shouldn't be thinking about a car, you should be, you know, buying a house, or you should be, you know, replacing your kitchen, or you should be doing things that increase the value of your property, and, you know, putting money aside for
being sensible,
private education. And it's like, yeah, there's all of this practical stuff, but you also need, you know, that's being alive, right? Yeah. But then you've got to live.
Yeah.
And I think if you're a non-car person, people won't get it. You know, I had a friend who was like, I just don't understand why you would spend so much money on a car. Meanwhile, they're sitting there with a £2,500 handbag. Yeah. And I said to her, I was like, yeah, but you just spent £2,500. Oh, but the craftsmanship. Have you not seen the material? Yeah. It starts going into all of the details. I was like, so you're a handbag enthusiast, right? And she said, yeah. And I was like, I'm a car enthusiast. If I was a handbag enthusiast, then I would appreciate your appreciation of handbags, but I don't understand why anyone would spend more than about 30 quid on a handbag. It just carries stuff for you. And it's, yeah, but a car just gets you from point A to point B. There you go. That's where, no. It doesn't just get you from point A to point B. Sometimes it gets you from point A to point A.
Yeah. Why do we have Rolexes when you could buy a Casio?
Exactly.
Which does the same thing. Or a Nove and get a discount with JM's special discount code.
Link in the description.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm about to say, I can't get you a discount on an Apple Watch, I'm afraid. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, I don't think they're doing discounts on anything, do they? No, they don't.
But I think the point is that like it's drummed into us by the majority of people are not car enthusiasts. Let's face it, it's a niche thing. So the majority of people are trying to tell you about all these sensible things you should do with your time and money, but they'd still go and spend. They'll tell you, oh, you shouldn't spend $5,000 on that forged internals upgrade that you're doing on your 370Z Nismo, but they will spend $7,000 on a couple going away on a nice holiday in Europe.
Also, right, I think this links into this very, very strange and extremely British thing of being snobbish about cars. I think if we were having this discussion in the United States, like, we all have our own issues with the USA, but there's also a lot of stuff that they do right. And when you talk to people about cars here, if they're not car people, you turn up someone in a nice car and they'll be like, oh, and what do you do? Because I think secretly they're hoping that, you know, you're going to tell them something that means you haven't actually earned that car. Yeah. You know, that's, I think sometimes piston heads is like the worst of this. I think there are certain people who would much easier believe the notion that aliens landed next to you, ripped out the cash point at the petrol station and gave you $100,000, and that's how you bought your R8, as opposed to it just being the result of your own damn hard work and graft.
And
right?
sacrifice.
Yeah.
So maybe you haven't gone on any of those holidays. Maybe you don't buy the designer clothes. Maybe you haven't been, I don't know, spending money on a kitchen that works just fine, looks nice, and doesn't really need to be redone.
And you haven't bought avocados and had a Netflix subscription, as everyone tells you.
Exactly. Yeah. There you go.
There was a guy, I need to find this article if I can, but this must be some time ago now, but 15, 20 years ago. He was a hairdresser. And he was Italian, and he wanted to have a Ferrari. And the way he did it was by basically doing kind of what you just said. He just went without anything that wasn't an essential. So he didn't really go out to dinner, didn't really go out to the movies, didn't even have a mobile phone. He bought what he needed for work and what he needed at home, and that was it. And saved all the money up over years and years and years, until he had enough money for a brand new Ferrari. And it was an F430 at the time. And he was absolutely delighted with it. And he's like, yeah, I've just saved and saved and saved and saved, because, you know, you look at all the things you could do, and you could go out, and sometimes I've made the mistakes of, you know, looking at how much money you spend going down the pub or something like that, which for me is a business expense. I'm not a rampant alcoholic. You know,
you do only tend to drink Diet Coke.
Yeah, that's about as wild as I'll go. Perhaps a mocktail if I'm feeling very fruity. But steady you two. We'll get that comment section going, you know.
That's
a whole different topic.
That was like, if only they knew me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Ooh, just as well they don't.
Matron.
And in the role of Kenneth Williams. So yeah, he did that. But you know, I remember when I did the YouTube thing for the first, like, I don't know, few years. I'll let my colleagues recover in a bit.
Sorry, carry on.
I didn't even play video games. I didn't do nothing. You two, we're supposed to be giving the illusion of being professionals that know what we're doing. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am.
Stuck in the middle with... Okay, right, let's go. So you were saying, dear?
And we are now going to be serious and professional.
Can we get those little red recording lights in the corner? Like, please be serious.
Today, we are now going to be very BBC.
Yes, no regional accents, damn it.
No, 1967 it is.
Yeah. So that rotten Mr. Hitler will give him what for, I tell you.
What has this devolved into? Honestly, I don't know if we can cut this, but if you're listening at home, I'm sorry.
Oh no,
we are
this
who
is
we are.
This is staying in.
This is going in. Somewhere, there's a therapist listening to this, being like, "Brilliant! This lot are going to pay for my retirement." There's some serious issues we got to unpack with these kids. So yeah, I mean, you know, I made sacrifices and things which were totally and completely self-inflicted, right? I make no bones about that at all. But, I put the work in and put the hours in and did things because I wanted to have the nice thing. And I always get people say to me like, if you do the job you love, you don't work a day in your life. Now that is complete and total nonsense, right? That is awful. Now I'm lucky I have what I consider to be more or less a dream job, right? It is brilliant. I love it. I am thankful for it every single day. But it is still a job or a career, as and more accurately described.
I refer to it as a business.
Yeah, it is a business, and like all businesses, if you neglect it, it will neglect you. It will pay back your efforts twofold, either be they positive or negative. But what it is the motivation to get up in the morning, to get out there, when I've got that 6 o'clock alarm call and I've got to drive 120 miles to get somewhere, then 120 miles back. And I might, in winter in particular, I might not be home during daylight hours because I'm working, but that's fine. That's absolutely fine because I'm going to do something that I enjoy, which is driving cars. And I get to talk about cars with people, and often my favorite bit of the job is not just the driving the cars, it's that after I'm done with that, I tend to buy people lunch at the pub to say thank you for their time and effort and everything, because I can't pay people to use their car because I'd be invalidating their insurance. And it's a really nice way to get to know people, and I've gotten to know some really, really interesting people. But winding the clock back a little bit, I think Will and I are particularly fortunate because, I think we did grow up in a really quite brilliant era to be young and a petrol head.
Oh, yeah.
Because we had the new series of Top Gear was on. So basically every week that came out, you got to talk about it. The next day at school, you're talking about it, And I think there is almost, you know what? And I say this appreciating what it is that I now do for work. There is something quite magical and quite fantastic about that old-fashioned thing of, if you want to watch the thing on telly, you better be in front of the telly at the right time with the channel tuned in, hoping that dad doesn't want to watch the cricket instead or something like that. Yeah. Otherwise, you'll miss it. Because nobody ever really knew how to program the VCR to record a different channel anyway. So I kind of love that. And it's actually, I know this sounds daft, this is one of the things that got me back into Formula One, because I've worked out that it is, I think, physically impossible for the Formula One not to be spoiled within about 3 hours of the race. Like, it's going to happen. Whether you turn the radio on, you go and check the blooming weather or something like that, and you'll see it.
Or someone sends you a message saying something about who just won and do you think so-and-so should have got a penalty. It's like, I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah. Like, I will always message Ant and be like, oh, have you watched, like, before I spoil anything? And then he'll be like, no, I've not watched it. I'll be like, oh, burger, blimey, what he was up to.
No, he never does that. He's always double checks first.
Yeah. But yeah, as a kid now, okay, all right, gents, can you relate? Okay. And this actually does hark back to what we were talking about in the Top Gear episode about the funeral for a Ford episode of the Grand Tour. There is, I think, in a small boy's life, no event, no Christmas, no birthday, no family gathering, no wedding, no anything that can compare to Dad's new car day. Mm-hmm. That's a big event. I don't know if you had this, Ant.
No, he would just rock up with a new car. And I'm like, what's going on? Where's the other car? And I'd be like, I'd miss the other car. But to be fair, there were generally a Toyota Crown, Toyota Crown, Mini, Toyota Corolla, Toyota Crown. That was it.
Did I ever tell you about the time my dad came home? I think it might have been from school. And he lived, he's going to kill me for admitting this publicly, but he lived in Luton and near the factory at the time, which still was making cars, the Vauxhall factory. He came home one day and there was a new car on the driveway. So Dad went in and said to his dad, my granddad, like, oh, got a new car. And he said, yeah, but don't tell anyone. He said, well, I'm going to tell everyone. It's just a new car. It's exciting. No, just keep it to yourself. How am I going to keep it to myself? It's on the blooming driveway. It's right there. Everyone can see it. Turns out, I think there may have been some industrial goings-on happening at Luton. Shocking, I know, for the British car industry in the 1970s. And I think Grandad had done a deal with somebody to kind of sneak the car out the back gates for some cash. And I think a few months later, the car had to make a similarly rapid disappearance. But it's back in the time of record keeping being so poor, factories could misplace whole cars.
Wasn't there a story about a guy who worked in a factory, like it might have been a Ford or a Dodge factory or something like that? Maybe there was a country song written about it as well, actually, about the guy who was taking a piece of a car home like every day and just ended up building a car in his like garage from just where the factory he works at, just taking panels and taking stuff like that. Wasn't that a thing?
And then the kit car was born.
Yeah, I swear it was something like that.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not entirely sure how you're going to get a chassis and a duffel coat.
I guess they welded it up at home. Who knows?
Yeah, I've seen some old car chassis. They're not exactly complicated.
No.
I mean, to be fair, if you've got a few old school chairs, I can knock you up a Noble. There's
Brilliant.
Well, did I send you the photo, right? So I drove a Noble M12 the other day, and I was sat in it. I took it to my curry night because the chap who came out, a lovely chap called Rich, who has a YouTube channel called Rich Runs Cars, he borrowed the 550 for a bit, and I drove his Noble about, which is a bit of a culture shock on both fronts. And the Noble's lovely, very, very fast. You'd love it. It's an
I
awesome
still
bit of
haven't
kit.
driven one.
We'll try and get you in one. I might be able to sort that out. Anyway, Nobles have what they call an integrated roll cage, which is a very, very polite way of saying the chassis is indoors. Right? And so you've got, as you might imagine it, steel tubes behind you, but also going, ahead of you and wrapping around the windscreen and everything. So in theory, making it a bit stronger in a crash. I still wouldn't put that to the test. In the 430, I have the optional roll hoop in the back, yeah? And that is kind of what you imagine. It just goes from side to side, but you can't really touch it or anything like that, or not when you're, in the front of the car. And it's wrapped in lovely, beautiful Alcantara that's then trimmed to match the rest of the cabin. So it's got the correct stitching and everything else. It's a nice touch. And it's also quite soft and padded as well. So I was looking at this roll cage in the Noble, and I thought, I wonder if they've done the same thing as the Ferrari, because it is like wrapped in Alcantara. So I went to go and touch it. And no, it's just a piece of Alcantara wrapped around a metal tube.
No padding.
No padding at all. And I then noticed that where I was sat, because I am, those playing the JM drinking game, get your pints ready, as I am long of torso, my head was about 2 inches away from this basically unprotected steel tube. So if I just moved my head slightly to the right, I would tap it. So in the event of probably like a 5 mile an hour shunt, the thing would probably kill me. It must be, I think, for that reason alone, the most dangerous car I've ever driven. Because at least in an old car, it might fold up like a packet of crisps, but there's a chance that I might not hit it. But that, you're like, no, guarantee you have an accident, you're hitting your head.
They do say that you shouldn't have a roll cage in a street car if you're not going to be wearing like helmets and things like that. Like those kind of like full tube chassis things, like stuff like that.
Have you ever hit a cage with a helmet on?
No, but I have hit a kind of like roll bar on a friend's car with my bare head before, and it hurt a lot.
Yeah, I've smacked cages with a helmet on, and it hurts. Like, no, you do it without protection. Like, no bueno, no bueno.
So the message is, don't do it without protection.
Hey kids, don't do Nobles unless you're short. Right. So yeah, the guy, he was like, well, it never really dawned on me. And I was like, well, yeah, that's because, those extra inches make all the difference.
He did say parental advisory at the beginning of this episode.
Yeah.
For a completely different reason.
If we get back on topic,
I think so.
Fine.
Mental health.
The positive
Positives of
power
mental health.
of the automobile can start a conversation like this that results in me breaking down in tears of laughter. There you go.
This is how it works. You just because a situation isn't great doesn't mean you can't be a bit of a tit.
Oh yeah, that is something I've taken to heart almost inappropriately over my life.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's great. It's great. I want to talk about a positive experience. We were talking about my Mazda MX-5 I had in in the last episode that we did.
The Unos Roadster.
Unis Roadster,
Yeah.
the import. When I had that on, like in the middle of kind of 2015, I was like kind of like a fully single man. I was kind of, pretty much alone. Most of the time I worked up here, or I was at home.
Your early 20s at that point?
Early 20s. I was 24
Yeah.
at that time. So I found myself quite lonely, actually, even though, and I think this is the problem a lot of this generation has, is even though we're online and we're talking to people and things like that, like sometimes you lack a bit of human interaction, because especially at that age as well, a lot of my friends were off in university or had moved away from the area. I've stayed in pretty much the same area my whole life, by choice, actually, because I love where we are. So sometimes you find yourself like just kind of a bit alone. And
Isn't 24, I don't know if you found this, but your early 20s, I don't know, I'm not sure that Ant found it, but maybe you did. Your early 20s are actually quite a difficult age, because I found for me at that time, when you're a teenager, you're obviously working, you're learning, you're doing whatever. I was in my case, I was at school and then went to film school. And of course, while you're learning and preparing for the world of work and everything, you've got all these plans, you've got all these ideas for how life is going to go. And of course, when you start out, of course, you're starting at the bottom, because that's where everybody starts. But by the time you're about 23, 24, I remember being at that point being like, I should have been doing better than this by now. It's at that point where you realise that all your hopes and dreams might maybe just stay as hopes and dreams. And you're like, reality's kind of giving you a hoof in the spuds. And you go, oh, yeah, cheers.
Not for me.
No, I thought you were going to say that.
I was already married by 24. Been married for nearly 2 years. Because I finished university, I got this pretty cool job, and I think by that point, I don't know, I think I was earning double what most of my friends who had graduated were earning. So I was actually in a really good place for a change. It felt like I was like, oh, life is good. So 24 going on, and then I bought my first house at 25. Oh. So I was actually. It was like a bit of a roller coaster. It was like way down the bottom, and then it came back up. It took about 9 from the age of 18 to about 21. I was in and out of homelessness, and then around 22, when I left university, I got this job that after the first year, I did such a good job of it that I managed to get quite a bit of a pay increase. So by the time I was then 24, I was working towards buying my first house within a year. So I was in a good place.
Important thing to say, particularly for anybody listening at home or in their car, in a field, or running across the Serengeti, wherever you may be, just in case you are in one of those situations, maybe a bit like the ones we've described or other things, and things aren't great. If I have learned anything from life, from my own experiences and from those of others, that it might be that things aren't great. It might be that things are, if you're being impolite about it, a bit shit, right? And that's okay. Like, it is okay, because life does that. Sometimes life hands you a really, really crappy lot. And very often, that's not your fault. Like, sometimes it just does that. But if there is a message I ever wanted to give to anybody, it's that while it might not be okay right now, it will be okay. Like, you will be able to get out of where you are. You will be able to sort out what is going on. It might not be easy. It might not be simple, but there is help out there for people in whatever situation you might be in. One thing I think that is really important, and something that we are slowly improving, but not, I think, quick enough, is the fact that men in particular are really, really bad at talking about with their friends about their feelings. And everybody knows somebody that knows somebody who says, oh, it's really weird. I was having a laugh and a chat down the pub with Dave, and then he was gone. We didn't know. We had no idea. We didn't know he was going through this or going through that, or we didn't know that this was happening. And it's like, no, because unfortunately, we've sort of got ourselves in a situation where sometimes actually people's friends are the people they find the hardest talking to. And so there are services out there. One I want to mention is called Andy's Man Club, which I saw start off as a tiny, tiny little thing. And now they've got, I see signs for it in Scotland. I see signs for it all over the place. They've grown exponentially. So if you do want to go and just talk to people, and sometimes talking really is maybe all you need. And you don't, by the way, need anything to be wrong. The whole point of Andy's Man Club is that it's a place where blokes can go and just talk to people that they don't already know. And then if they want to, if they feel like it, they can discuss more important things, more serious things with people that they can then confide in who don't have to be involved with their personal lives. But, you know, that help is out there. You just need to ask for it. So, yeah.
And I want to do a quick shout out for a meet called Overfueled, run by someone called Lauren. And that whole meet is kind of inspired by the idea of people coming together, and if they need support from the community, that they can reach out. So, and she raises a lot of money for a charity. All the merch that they sell, proceeds go to supporting mental health charities. But I feel like we interrupted Will.
I did terribly. Sorry.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Yeah. He says, you know, blokes just don't talk about stuff. And now I'm going to interrupt you and not let you talk about stuff.
It's okay.
But you were saying that, you know, and at that time you were feeling lonely.
Yeah, it's one of those ones, you know, and to be fair, James' interruption was actually quite relevant to it all. Like, you know, when perhaps people of our generation as well, in your kind of early 20s, you're right, you do feel like you are trying to figure out what on earth is happening with your life if you don't have it made already. And it's one of those, I'd been single for a little bit, and I just didn't really know what to do with myself in the evenings, and you know, so night drives you were talking about, I would do those all the time in my MX-5, in my Eunice Roadster. I would put the roof down, no matter kind of like if it was warm or cold or anything like that. I would go out. Sometimes I'd get out of bed at like 10, 11 at night, and I would disappear into the wee hours and just come back. And I've gone nowhere in particular, and it just gives you a bit of time to reset, to get in the car, because those who have commutes, like, you know, sometimes people use their commutes to go from work mode to home mode. They give you that reset to process what the day is, and you know, listen to music, kind of get in and go back into being prepared to go into your family life, rather than if you don't have a commute, you're trying to go from one to another. In the first half an hour you're at home, like people say, oh, let's do this, let's do that, you know, we need to go put the bins out, we need to go shopping, blah 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 blah. And you just, sometimes, I don't know if you guys, like, you don't have time to process what has happened to you that day before you're then forced into another situation where you have to process new things and new information. And, you know, sometimes just being out in the car at night gave me time by myself to reflect, you know, kind of subconsciously, because when you're driving, unless you are like old Doris in her Morris, who is hitting everything, you're pretty much concentrating on the act of driving. And then you can just unwind and do something that takes your kind of full concentration. But I don't know, it's weird. If you're somebody that does it, it's very cathartic, kind of going out and just using up half a tank of petrol.
That little.
Yeah, exactly.
Convertibles in particular,
absolutely,
are so good for that, because also convertibles, I think, remove the requirement for speed. Because you feel like you're going much faster in a convertible anyway. I used to say a similar thing about motorbikes, which is that fared bikes are great on a track, but off a track they're dangerous, because, you know, you need to be doing about 130, 140 before you realise you're actually carrying like that kind of speed. Whereas on an unfared bike, at about 70 or 80 mile an hour, basically the wind is trying to peel you off the bike anyway. So you sort of realise that, no, you are going quite quick. That's enough. The week that I lost my grandmother, I had a bright yellow, Vegas yellow, actually specifically, Audi R8 Spider. And it was so nice just to have that to tart around in and tool about. And the weather actually was glorious. So I wound up, actually, I didn't realise it obviously at the time, but I got to see my grandmother for the last time because all hospitals everywhere, there is nowhere near enough car parking. And when you've got a great big wide Audi R8, you do not want to park it in a hospital car park. And so what I would do is we were able to visit any hour of the day that we wanted. So I wound up going in at, I think, 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that, because I'd done my work for the day. I'd finished my editing and everything. And I thought, you know what, I don't want to try and go in the morning at 8 o'clock because, parking is going to be rubbish. But at midnight, she's probably going to be asleep one way or the other. At midnight, I can drive over. The drive is nice. It's lovely country roads that at that time are unoccupied. It was still fairly warm because it was the middle of June. And, get the roof down. Again, you have a bit of time to just clear your thoughts, really. And also, I didn't have to fight for dominance of parking space at the hospital. I could park wherever I wanted and get in and out easily. And it turns out that, I turned up at midnight to go and see her as opposed to 8 o'clock. And she was gone at 4 o'clock. So, just because I wanted to get out for a drive, that sort of let me have that. So, again, it's making a positive out of something that is overall quite a negative experience. But yeah.
It's a funny way how life works sometimes, isn't it? Where just to get the right set of circumstances can lead to making a bad experience kind of in some way, like one, you can kind of help put yourself to peace with things at. Do you know what I mean? It's like you got to see her because you decided to go in the convertible for a late night drive, to go and see her then. 'Cause that's the car you had on the drive that week.
I mean, I do genuinely, and not at all in a patronising way, I do feel sorry for the people that just go, oh, blooming supercars, they're all rubbish and crap. My modified Golf R's better anyway. And it's like, look.
It ain't.
There is so much more about owning exotic cars, I'm going to call it as opposed to just supercars, than how fast they are or aren't. And a huge part of it is that sense that they are something special. They are something rare. Obviously, price comes into it a little bit, but actually, I remember being in Andorra and I was driving around an E-Type Jag, and kids walking around that must have been, 4 or 5, were looking at it and pointing. And I thought that's so fascinating because a kid doesn't know what an E-Type is. They don't know what a Jag is. They barely know what a car is. Like, they definitely don't know how much money it is or isn't worth. Yet there is something about that car that must, affect some primal part of the brain that makes them go, look at that. It's amazing. And, supercars and exotic stuff has that same effect on people. And I know we've talked about it before, but it is that ability to go somewhere and by your very presence light up somebody else's day, because they've now seen one of these cars that's rare as heck, and they're saying to their mate, hey, there's only 333 of those, did you know that? And there's only 33 in this country, and that one's got the carbon fiber windscreen surround, so we're never going to see one like that ever again, because I remember being that child.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I'm still that child.
I am
actually,
too.
to be fair.
I saw an Alpha 4C the other day.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah, it was coming down my street and I had to do a double take. I was like, is that what I think it is? And yes, it was.
I've seen a whole bunch of Alpines recently. A110s seem to be a lot more common than they once were. But yeah, 4Cs, I've not seen a 4C in the wild for a little while.
Yeah.
I would suggest one to you, but I think it might be the only car I can suggest that's less practical than your Lamborghini.
Do you know what? Where was I? I was with my son somewhere, and we were walking along and we saw one, and I was like, I used to quite fancy one of those, but I've kind of gone off it since for some reason.
Yeah.
And I don't know why.
I think they're gorgeous.
I know they're beautiful. Well, I prefer the ones that have the headlights that were a bit more like the original concept car, which was just like the nice smooth headlights, not the bug-eye headlights.
Okay, yeah. So the Spider introduced the covered headlights, and you could then get it as an option on the regular one.
Yeah, I preferred those headlights, which was closer to the original concept that they did. But no, I still think it's a beautiful looking car, but do I want one? No. I don't know why. I'd have to drive one, but I just don't. It doesn't appeal to me as much anymore.
You'd like the way that they drive. Yeah, we'll have to get you in one.
You know, it's going ever so slightly back on track. You know, I know. It's amazing. You know, as I said, 2023 was the worst year of my life. 2024 was a lot of recovering from that. This year has been a good year so far.
High five.
High five.
Denied.
That wasn't a denial. I got the
He got confused.
I did.
He sent the keeper the wrong way.
I got double-fisted. So double-handed.
That's not helping. But 2025 has been...
2025 has been a good year for me mentally. And I've managed to kind of, you know, I spent some time in my therapy, and I've spent some time to hold myself accountable and to hold others accountable and to really question what I'm doing in my life and to question where I am. And I've kind of realized that actually, you know, I'm doing all right. You know, when I think about success, I always had thought before that in many regards that you need to have a house. You know, that's house ownership is something like I'm sure every other millennial can agree on, is that we're all working on, hopefully this year, fingers crossed. That you have to have a house, you have to have, you know, the best job, you have to have this and that, and almost materialistically. And I've kind of realised that the things for me that make me happy are my wife, are my silly little car collection. Even though they're not expensive, they bring me great joy, even though many would look at them and think they're rubbish. And I'm sure there are other people out there who agree that may not have expensive cars, may have silly little things that the general public don't like the look of, or don't enjoy. But to you, if they're what you like, that's really the most important thing.
Yep.
And I think reiterating to myself those that are important to me and stuff like that. You know, success for me is the fact that I don't have what I'd consider a lot in many ways, but what I do have, I do greatly appreciate. And you don't have to have the big collections, the big house, the big that to actually to be happy. They're just sometimes a bonus that if you're lucky enough to have in life, you get to enjoy, you know.
100%. I think when people say success, I think they should... It's better if you qualify that with what do you mean by success?
Yes.
Because if you say financial success, that's one thing. Successful family,
yes,
as in family life,
yep,
that's another thing. Successful friendships is another thing. Like success for me is like a multifaceted thing. And one of the things that I personally find frustrating, and I think this results in people putting a lot of pressure on themselves, is people confuse the concept of quality of life with standard of living.
Yes.
They're not the same. You can have a really high standard of living, which might result from great financial success, but it doesn't mean you've got a great quality of life, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So I think it's quite important to separate those. And I was very lucky. My dad gave me that phrase when I was quite young, that don't confuse the standard of living with the quality of life. And I think it helped keep me grounded and not be chasing, you know, pure financial success for the sake of it at the expense of everything else. Instead, it's helped me try and find my way to doing things that are genuinely fulfilling and deeply fulfilling, because that's really what we want in life, right? We want fulfillment and we crave it. And sure, we can find joy in things because we can have a laugh and fun about stuff, but it's transient, it disappears quickly. And we can be content with things, but content is kind of a bit, okay, well, I'm content, it's okay. But we want to be fulfilled. And fulfillment can come in so many different ways for so many different people. And I think it's good to keep that in mind.
Also, fulfillment can come in many different stages as well.
Yeah.
You know, I'm feeling pretty fulfilled in life currently at the moment, which is good, but I still
That
have
was
my
probably
goals.
the sorbet, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. That was a very good lunch. That was a very good lunch. And in many regards, obviously, I have my goals and the things I want to achieve. But right now, I'm doing all right. You know, it's one of those. And I know this might sound a bit soppy to some, but I have thoroughly had my life this year lifted up by spending time with you two.
Aww.
You've been a very good influence to me and very good help in many regards behind the scenes.
Give it 5 minutes.
I know, give it 5 minutes. But, it's been enjoyable also doing this stuff on this silly little show for the people at home as well. And I hope that we can bring you some joy as well, because sometimes that's what it's all about. You get spending time with people you enjoy, if you can kind of share that. And, there may be people out there listening that might not have a lot of people in their life. They have nobody in their lives. And sometimes, YouTube, podcasts and things like that, it can make people feel involved and make people feel like they've got kind of a friend in some ways. So if we're doing that for you, you're great, you're excellent.
Oh, it definitely does, because I've certainly had it where I've had people walk up to me in the streets and talk at me for about 5 minutes, and then they go, shit, you don't know who I am, do you?
No, that's it.
Because they've kind of forgotten the whole thing. They've watched hundreds of hours of me talking to them, and then don't realise that the screen is one way.
Yes.
Parasocial relationship.
That is exactly that.
Yeah, I think I was just about to say, save the inspirational monologue for right near the end so we can leave everyone inspired, because you were getting very inspirational there. But yeah, no, people are, you mentioned lonely, people are lonelier than ever, despite how digitally connected we are. And
all because of these.
Yep. And it is significantly to do with that, but
That's a mobile phone for those who are listening.
yeah, for those listening, that's a mobile phone. It is a lot to do with mobile phones. But I mean, look, a lot of the time, social media distractions were happening more on computers for a little while before the smartphone really kicked in for most people. But, this is one of the things that people do talk about, that they say that, sometimes they watch YouTube, and the consumption of like authentic material, podcasts, it's about keeping people company. I was at an event last month, and I think I mentioned this on a previous podcast episode. Somebody came up to me and said, I just want to say thank you, because you guys on the podcast kept me company on my whole drive across the NC 500. And I thought, well, that's great. That to me, that felt special, because you are keeping someone company. But then on the loneliness side, one of the other things that I love about cars is that it connects people, it brings people together. And you think, oh well, I want to get out in my car. Sometimes I feel that I need a bit of an excuse. I can't just jump in my car and drive for no good reason. I want to go somewhere, and I'll look for a car meet that's happening, and check out the reviews of the car meet, what people seem to be like. And if it's a good one that's not with people doing silly stuff, then I'll go along, and then almost guaranteed I'll get there, and probably within about 5 or 10 minutes someone will come up and say, oh, is that yours? Oh yeah, that's mine. Oh cool, that's really cool. Oh, what car are you driving? Next thing you know, you got a new friend.
Yeah. Just think about the fact that we've got 3 people in this room who are in many regards very different, but also share a same common interest. I don't know if we were all knitting enthusiasts, if we'd all be sat here together, but you never know.
Maybe.
We would, just in silence. Yeah.
Exactly.
Click, click.
So yeah,
Did you hear what Gertrude got up to last week?
To get the curlers on.
So yeah, it is funny how car culture works. I've made so many friends with cars, and I realise in many regards we have nothing else in common, but we always have something to say.
Yeah. That's how this has really gone about, isn't it?
Yeah,
I met James through a passion for cars. It so happened.
Whenever I talk to my non-car friends, they go, so how do you know Ant? Cars. How do you know Will?
Cars.
How do you know Ben?
Cars.
So, and actually, here's a real example. Okay, I'm sure he won't mind us talking about it, but our mutual friend Ben, who I am now calling, to avoid confusion with Dad Cars Ben, I'm going to call this one Ben the Sparkle, because he had a profession which he'd been doing for a little while, but wasn't what you'd call fulfilling. And we've been talking for a little while, and he's very, very passionate about cars, was looking to a change of career, but not really sure what he wanted to do. Like I think some of us, not particularly well suited to your classic 9-to-5 office environment. And basically, having chatted to him for a while, I said, look, have you considered valeting as a career? Because he works outdoors, very, very good, does a fantastic job of cleaning cars, got a good attention to detail, and most importantly, willing to put the work in. And over the last sort of couple of months, we've helped him start up a business around cars. So he's taken something that he was just passionate about and has now turned that into his business. And we've been able to use social media to help get clients for his business, because traditionally, before social media was the thing, to try and get advertising for any kind of business is going to be a very large cost that you often might not be able to afford. But now there is so much that you can do and achieve for very little. So if you're in the Bedfordshire or Three Counties area and you need your car cleaned to a very high standard, please check out Ben at Mile by Mile Valeting. And it's just another example of, like, he's a friend that I've made through cars. We've gotten to know each other really, really well. He's appeared on the channel a couple of times. He's been here on the podcast before as well. And it's just great to see how this weird little obsession we have about these things that, like you say, just get you from A to B, or sometimes not even that, can genuinely change lives and can provide inspiration to people in all sorts of different ways. It's funny when you speak to people that are not really into cars, and then they sort of, they don't really understand it, or they don't really know why people would even want to drive. And then you ask them if they've ever called an ambulance, and then you go, right, well, they still don't drive themselves. So, maybe think about that next time you sort of moan about someone going out to get their driving license or whatever. That could be the person that does genuinely come and save your life one day.
Yep.
It's interesting you talk about how you kind of met Ben. I don't know if I've said this before, but I speak up my friend Harry quite regularly on the podcast, who you've met. Yep. And he was my best man at my wedding. And we met initially through YouTube back in the day. And then the first time I met him properly, he came down here to do some work on his Peugeot 206 he had at the time. And we kind of became friends of cars, and then I started seeing him more, and then we came down, we swapped the gearbox out in his Citroen Saxo. He'd managed to blow a hole in it and got all the way, he got about an hour away to here with no gear oil and nothing, amazingly. And then we did that, we changed the clutch, put the gearbox on, then we just became good friends from here. And yeah, he was the best man at my wedding, and it's just through cars.
I tell you what, you chaps must have this. What else I really quite enjoy, and this is proper top tier car bore stuff, I really enjoy those unspoken relationships that you have with some of your other road users. Sometimes easier when you've got give me a minute.
No, I know.
When you've got a regular commute, sometimes it's a little bit easier, but I'm sure everyone can relate to wherever it is that you live, wherever it is that you go. There's probably some people whose driveway you always go a little bit slower past, we've always got something nice. Or maybe you catch them out and about on the road. Maybe they've got a similar car to you, or maybe it's one that you just think is quite cool. You've never spoken to them. You don't know what their name is. You don't really even know what they look like sometimes. You're like, but you see the car out and about, and you just, you see them, you go, oh yeah, no, I've seen him about. It's been a few months now. I was worried the car's sold, but it's not. And I just love that weird little thing you get.
I've got a great one of that. Back when I was kind of doing more commuting stuff, and I went to work at a regular time every day, down a regular road every day. This was when I was daily driving my Volkswagen Transporter that I had. There was somebody else with another Volkswagen Transporter. We'd always pass pretty much at the same time, at the same place, every day for months on end. And we'd always flash and wave every day. And then it was only after 2 years or so, we finally actually managed to stop and have a conversation. Yeah, it was madness.
Brilliant.
I always used to there's always somebody in the neighborhood that has a sort of revolving driveway of interesting stuff. When I was growing up, there was a chap who were pretty convinced must have either owned or worked for a car dealership, because he'd always have something quite interesting. I think my favourite was he had the V10 M5 when that was still the current thing. That was really cool. There was a guy that had a first-gen Aston Martin Vanquish, again, when they were a fairly new thing. And that, I always went through a sort of cut-through on my walk to school, which did add 2 minutes to my journey, but meant I could see a Vanquish in the morning. And that was really, really cool. And then about 3 years ago or so, I had a Bentley Bentayga press car. and I was going out to get in it to go off, and this chap was walking his dog, and he stopped to have a chat with me, and I'd seen him walking his dog like 100 times before, but never spoken to him. And he was saying about how he'd been chatting with his son, and they decided that this was their favourite of all of the cars that had been on my driveway. And then I sort of realised, I was like, yeah, that bloke in the neighbourhood with the driveway, it's me, isn't it? I was so like, it's just such like a sort of full circle moment. I mean, I still get it. Every time I'm driving a Ferrari, Lamborghini, McLaren, R8, whatever it might be, through town, and you get some young lad give you like a big thumbs up, it makes me feel like I'm that young lad again, seeing that amazing car. Like it I started the thought early and didn't really finish it. Like it's that being able to bring joy to somebody else's day is what makes exotic car ownership worth it. It is not how pretty they are. It is not how nice the leather is. It is not how fast they are. It is not how big the engine is. It is not the top speed. It is not the 0 to 60 time. It is the fact that you are basically just a rolling smile machine. Like, that's it. That's what makes it. I know you experienced this when you took the Lambo into town for the first time.
Yeah, that was wild. It was just I've got lots of people showing attention and taking pictures, but this was like, it's like the R8 experience driving through London in the past had been a little bit like, I don't know, D-list celebrity type. This was like being an A-list celebrity equivalent. Obviously the car was the star, but as we were driving down Regent Street, literally people were just turning, and like flashes on phones were going off either side of us as we were driving down, and it was just wild and crazy. But the main thing was the kids who would be like, "Oh man, that's such a cool car! Love your car!" And it's like, like you said, I remember being that kid. But I like the idea of a car being a mobile. What did you say? Rolling smile machine. I think that is my takeaway from today. That it's always nice to help someone else in their day. It's always nice to help bring a smile to someone else's face. It makes you feel good to bring a smile to their face. And I think this is what we're doing when we have these cars that we love, that other people love and maybe don't always get to see. It's not showing off. It's sharing your love for cars and being a rolling smile machine. I like it.
Yeah.
Did I tell you somebody chased me not like nefariously, chased me half a mile to my destination when I was out in the maestro, because they had to come and talk to me about it. They had to come and see it. They hadn't seen one in years. And they got out of the car and they're like, like that kind of thing. And they just had to have a chat with me. And like, that's really cool. I mean, like, I'm glad like the person wasn't like trying to like put me in the boot of their Vauxhall Vivaro van, you know, kind of thing. Like, but it was a really kind of actually a nice experience in many regards. So doing that exact same thing, giving people a smile and giving, you know, them something to kind of be happy about, and a story, you know, to go home and talk to about that day. Something that'll just kind of perk their day up. And, you know, on the mental health subject, it's just, cars have perked me up when I've seen them so many times. You know, that's enough. Do that little tiny thing you were talking about earlier, just to give you a little bit of a boost, that stab in the arm. And
and when you hear them, sometimes you don't see them, you hear them, and you're like, oh, what's that? Sounds like a V10. Nope, it's a V12. Oh, could that be? Could it be an Aventador? Oh yes. Oh, that sounded so good. And sometimes you don't even see it, but that's enough to give you the goosebumps.
So for people who have only like heard some of these cars like on YouTube and films and stuff like that, hearing them in like real life is total different experience.
Yeah.
You know, as good as THX and Dolby Atmos is, it doesn't, you know, give you the feeling of standing behind your Lamborghini when you give it a cold start and it thumps you in the chest kind of thing, you know.
I mean, I'm lucky enough that I got to go to the Formula One when it was the V10 era.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I can still hear it. Like it was so loud. I think the only other time I ever experienced anything like it was when I did the Daytona 500, the NASCAR, and that's just incredible. Like, I was fairly high up in the stands. You still need ear protection. Like, it's just brilliant. But I'm like, there's something primal about that. There's something just amazing about seeing the whole thing, and you feel it in your chest as they go past. It's amazing. Like, that's something I'd also say for anybody that's younger as well that wants to go and see stuff. Like, you know, because Britain is the size that it is, most people are reasonably close to a racetrack. So I recall being 16 when I only had a moped. I would get the instructions to Snetterton from my dad, write them on the back of an envelope, sellotape it over the speedo because I could only do 30 anyway, so I couldn't get done for speeding. I think there was like one village had a 20 limit, so I just folded the paper over for that so I didn't speed. And then I go to Snetterton, often take my camera in my backpack and take some pretty average shots of cars going around, but just walk around the car park because there'd be track days and test days. You didn't even have to pay to get in. You just go and look at stuff and talk to people. It was brilliant.
I've got a great story about Snetterton.
Oh.
And it was one that was with me for several years. I went to a boarding school for a while because as I've mentioned before, I have autism, ADHD and other things like that. And the local education system wasn't great with me. So I went to one which specialised in people who had kind of like, not even learning disabilities, but like required extra kind of needs and things like that, you know, to do it properly.
Some bastard school for difficult beggars.
Exactly, pretty much. The school I went to was roughly 2 miles from Snetterton. So I'd be laying in bed at night. And this is when they were doing night sessions and things like that. You know, or during the day, like you'd be out in the field and you could hear the cars going around full tilt, the bikes full tilt at Snetterton from where I was at school. You know, because it was probably before they had more restrictions on like noise and things like that, you know, back in like 2004 to 2007 when I was there. And it was great. So I've never been to Snetterton.
Oh, what?
I know I need to go down there at some point, but I have heard the cars going around there many times as I'm drifting off to sleep.
Oh, we've got to get you there for that. Yeah. Well, we're both going for the touring cars, so we'll see if you're available for that, because touring cars is actually really, really good fun. Like, in terms of the variety of stuff on track and the amount of stuff. Well, I'll speak with my other half because I've got a ticket and she's, you know, keen to go, but I think maybe she might have something else on the day, so we'll see.
Another little tangent from those, we all love them, especially this episode today, is I recently went on the website for the school, and it's no longer a boarding school. They've changed it to just a kind of a normal school for kids with sensory needs, and they have a virtual tour. And all I want to say is I went to the virtual tour and found out my old dormitory is now a food tech room, and I don't think there's any way of making that room sanitary, if I'm honest. If those walls could talk.
Oh, dear.
Oh, my God.
And on that delightful note, I feel like we should be just thinking about what are our closing thoughts for today. Mine is rolling smile machine.
Mine is now the times I spent in that dormitory. It's definitely just of the joy that cars can bring, especially when you're feeling down. You know, I actually need to get another convertible in my life, possibly. If I don't get into bikes, if that doesn't happen, I need to get a convertible, actually. And I think that's maybe my realization today. What about yourself, James?
Mine is simply a thought that I've had for quite some time, which is that, you know, I found myself nearly 10 years ago, not down, because I think that would be inaccurate, but disheartened, because I had this grand plan for where life was going to go and what I was going to do with it and how it was going to pan out, and it just wasn't. And I felt like I was treading water. I felt like I was just about barely paying the bills and just about surviving, doing what I was doing. And then I, through frustration, lunacy, and a few other things, I decided to give YouTube a go as a sort of last-ditch attempt before I had to go and get a proper job, which would have made me just die inside, because I'm an awful employee. I'm just the most useless, terrible, unemployable wretch that I would not wish on anybody. If I'm interested in something, I will put 25 hours a day into it. But if I'm not interested, honestly, I'm just not going to do the work. And so I threw myself into YouTube with to paraphrase General Melchett, a total pig-headed unwillingness to stare facts in the face, and just this absolute determination that I would manage to somehow make it work. And it has wound up exceeding any and every expectation that I ever had for it, and it has given me the greatest of experiences, the most amazing opportunities. Obviously, put food on the table, and then when things went well, did a lot more than that. And given me some incredible friends, present company particularly included. And I am just overjoyed that, this thing that was just an obsession, cars, like you say, we all would have talked about cars till the cows came home, even if nobody paid us to do it. The fact I could then actually not just talk about cars and get paid, but then earn enough money to be able to buy the cars that I dreamed about, that was just unreal. And that's something social media has a lot to answer for, a hell of a lot to answer for, because it's created quite a few problems, but it's also solved a fair few, and it's given opportunity to people like myself that previously I just wouldn't have had. So really, all I want to say is thanks everyone for supporting me along the way, because it's just been the most phenomenal journey, and that's why I am so very, very passionate, amongst other things, at trying to share this infectious joy and this notion that it can work, because it worked for me. And of course, if we can make people's lives a little bit better by having a nice car and driving it about, then more power to us. And also, again, really, really important to explain, as you've just said, you don't have to have an expensive car to have an interesting car.
No.
I have seen people turn up at car meets with cars that probably cost all about $1,000, if that. And sometimes it is by far the most interesting thing in the car park. There are days where Ferrari, there's loads of them, who cares? I've filmed a Lamborghini dealership, and I tell you, I'd never seen a crowd build as when I parked that Austin Allegro in front of it.
And we actually have a video coming up. In fact, maybe it might even be out by now, because I was kind of obsessed with Will's Maestro for various reasons, which, if you want to know why, and what the joy that then brought me, you're going to have to check that out via the link in the description. But yeah, anything else, boys?
I have one last thing to add, is that we should have the people check out our social media, our Instagram pages, because we all like to post little snippets of what we're up to, things that, that appear on the podcast and stuff that appear on the channel as well. And if you're interested in following us on those platforms, you are on, what is your username on Instagram?
Sports and Touring, SPORTZN Touring. You'll see it on the screen here.
Yep. And I am just simply Will the Plank. And you, sir?
I am JM on Cars. Raconteur.
There we go.
All right. So if you've got a story about how cars have helped to lift up your mood or get you out of a situation that you needed to be out of, then let us know in the comments. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing it there, send us an email at landlord@theradiatorarms.com.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.